Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Being in Love. Written by Is This Self-Care? Chapter 3. House Call by Genius Inventor. Draco's Eagle Owl was given a decent workout in the coming days as Draco and Granger negotiated back and forth on a few of the recommendations that he'd made. She suggested that some of the measures were positively draconian. Pun intended, do you forgive me? And tried to push back on them, with an especial focus on the home visit for personalized warding. Eventually, Draco pulled out his most severe quill and composed the following. Granger. Shacklebolt's orders on the warding of the Granger domicile aren't up for negotiation. Do let me know when would be convenient to come by this week for the warding. If you don't, I shall drop by at an inconvenient time by default. D. For Draconian. Malfoy. Unsure if you heard my sigh of exasperation from London, so I am recording its occurrence here for your information. I am more than capable of improving the warding on my own property, or of hiring a warding firm. But if Shacklebolt is insisting on your particular expertise, so be it. See my schedule for options. I have just updated. NB, they are very few. Tuesday evenings look the most promising, but I will be the doctor, Muggle healer, on call at the local surgery and may have to leave it in the middle. H. Granger. I know what a doctor is. D. So, what did the home of a nationally famous scholar, war heroine, healer, champion of just causes, researcher in danger look like? A modest sort of cottage in Cambridgeshire, as it happened. 3 bedrooms, at Draco's best guess. Granger stood at the gate. As he approached from his apparition point, she waved her wand to allow him to pass whatever preliminary ward she had set up. "What's wrong with your face?" she asked as Draco neared the gate. Always to the point was Granger. "Bludger," said Draco. "Oh, it looks bad." It probably did, too. Zabini had a mean swing. As he neared the gate, Draco saw Granger scrutinizing the injury with a well-practiced eye. She vacillated for a moment, then, apparently unable to resist do-gooding, blurted out, "Do you want me to have a look at it?" "No, I've already put a salve on," said Draco, brushing his fingers against his slowly bruising jaw. "That's going to make a lovely hematoma." "I'm fine. I came here toward your house, not for a consult." Granger's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Are you going to invite me in?" asked Draco, irked by her standing there, watching him with something like concern. Now he felt like some kind of vampire angling for an invitation over the threshold. "Come in, then," said Granger, a little snappish, pulling the gate open. Draco saw that she was dressed in another version of the white coat, this time accessorized with a dangling contraption wrapped around her neck. "You've left your auto-asphyxiation device on," said Draco, pointing to it. "It's a stethoscope," said Granger, with an unspoken "you cretin" attached to the end of the sentence. "Right," said Draco, not deigning to request clarification. "Give us a tour and let's crack on." She brought him through to the cottage's front room, which might have been a living room, except that it was an explosion of books. "You scolded me for placing a book half an inch out of place. Look at this disaster," said Draco, piqued by the injustice. "It's my digitizing project," said Granger. "It's a temporary disaster." She gestured to a Muggle machine in the center of it all, connected to a flattish version of a computer. "Digitalizing," Yes, preserving magical knowledge through muggle means, as I'm growing tired of lugging enormous books about, finding irreparably damaged or lost material because some idiot spilled tea on a page 20 years ago, and of having to search for things through ancient record cards like it's 1855. It's a pet project for my rarest volumes. Unfortunately, I haven't as much time to dedicate to it as I'd like. She brought Draco through to the kitchen, a rather muggle space, save for the variety of magical plants explosively taking over her window ledges, and various potions aglow here and there. There might have been something magical slowly brewing in a cauldron at the hearth, but she swept him past it. "Conservatory?" asked Draco as they moved to the next room. Granger looked at him as though he had just confirmed what a posh twat he was. "A conservatory? This isn't Ascot House. The letting agent called it a sunroom." That seemed an optimistic appellation to Draco, who watched January sleet begin to drizzle against the glass ceiling with skepticism. Then an odd, orange, squash-faced creature appeared and wound its way around Granger's ankles. In another moment of wild optimism, Granger referred to it as a cat. "What's wrong with your cat?" asked Draco, bending over to regard the creature with concern. "Nothing's wrong with him," said Granger. Both she and the creature looked at Draco with great offence. "He's Port Neasel, and very intelligent. Aren't you my darling, my sweetums, my angel boy?" As its ears were massaged by Granger, the cat regarded Draco with an expression of utmost disdain. Then it decided that it had had enough of Granger's attention and turned to leave, its absurd tail held high so that Draco got a full view of its bumhole. "Charming," said Draco. The tour continued to the cramped upstairs space. 3 small bedrooms, as Draco had guessed, with predictable points of entry that he would have to ward. The first bedroom appeared to be used as a study. Draco noted a kind of plinth in the middle of the space. On it rested a grimoire, very old and damaged, surrounded by the glow of a stasis charm. Granger saw what had caught his attention. "A tragedy. Don't ask me about it, or I shall cry." Draco did not wish to deal with bookish snivelling, and did not pursue the subject, but he made a mental note of the object for future prying. The second bedroom was quite bare, save for a long mat on the floor, candles, and a cluster of orchids. What ritual was Granger preparing to cast here? He tried to make sense of the candle arrangement, but it didn't match the geometry of anything he recognized. Finally, they came to Granger's bedroom, which she permitted him a glance into with evident unease. Draco couldn't find a civil way to say, "Stop bloody fidgeting. I only need to see how the baddies might try to kidnap you. I'm not here to rifle through your knickers." So he said nothing. An obnoxious jingle began to play somewhere in Granger's vicinity. She pulled a palm-sized muggle thingy out of her back pocket and spoke into it. From what Draco understood, she was being summoned to the surgery by the means of this device. She confirmed this by rushing past Draco to the stairs. "I have to go. I think you've seen enough to orient yourself. Please set the wards to let Crookshanks in and out. He likes to roam. I'll be back in a few hours." "Crookshanks?" called Draco as Granger tripped down the stairs. "There's a cat," said Granger. She disappeared outside, but instead of the crack of disapparition, Draco heard the sound of a motor. Granger was driving a muggle car. The absolute weirdo. Or perhaps not, he thought upon reflection, as he made his way back to the garden. If she was going to a muggle surgery, she'd have to show up by muggle means. An instantaneous apparition at the door would raise questions. As he pondered the overqualified dual life that Granger led, Draco began to ward. After about 2 hours of work, Draco pronounced himself satisfied. The wards would need to be recast every week or so, but no one would be able to waltz in sans Granger's permission. Points of entry and egress were all reinforced with the Or's standard kit and a few of Draco's own inventions. Underground approaches would be flummoxed by a robust Depellins Penetrationum, and aerial attacks would be rebuffed by the Cali Presidium. The usual assortment of intruder alarms were scattered about. Frankly, for a witch of Granger's relative fame, whose two closest chums were now Aurors, her protection measures had been paltry. But then it was peacetime, and she was a scholar, not a child chasing dark objects to murder an evil wizard 7 times over. The half-measle stared balefully at Draco through the sleet from the shelter of the stoop. Draco added the creature's magical signature to the wards and told him so. The creature blinked at him. Draco was unnerved. Just as the rain began to lessen, a car made its way up the drive and behind the cottage. Granger rounded the corner a moment later. "Still here, are you?" "I've just finished," panted Draco. Warding was a magically exhausting task. The half-measle was given a great many kisses on his ugly head as Draco stood by and tried not to look wet and sweaty. And where was his thank you, if you please? "I shall have to ward your car," said Draco, "if you use it to get around a lot. And the Muggle surgery, if you're there regularly." Granger frowned at him. "My car is brand new. You can't ward it. You'll muck something up." In the face of Draco's confused defense, she added, "Cars have electrical components in them now. Maybe they didn't when you were in Muggle studies." This was said as though Draco was approximately 120 years old and had last taken Muggle studies when cars were called horseless carriages. "I'll bung a sneakoscope into the glove box," said Granger. For someone so clever, she certainly was an idiot. "Excellent," said Draco. "That'll definitely ward off a Bombarda Maxima from 20 meters out. We'll be able to tell Shacklebolt that we've taken all necessary measures to protect you when we pull your charred remains out of the wreckage." The violent imagery was successful. Granger gave in. "Fine. You can ward it, but do try to stay away from the center bits, with all the buttons, next to the steering wheel." Draco's moment of triumph was ruined by a long and echoing hungry growl, unmistakably from his stomach. Unfortunate, he was prepared to blame the cat. There was a pause. Granger's eyes flitted to Draco's midriff. She appeared to be struggling between her natural feelings for him and her manners. Then, finally, "He must be famished. Do you want to come in? I've a few snacks. We can go over the recommendations and the ring." Why, yes, Draco was starving. 2 hours of warding really did take it out of a man. However, there was a 5-course meal waiting for him at the manor. However, he wanted to wrap up this affair and have his next communication with Granger be regarding the return of the ring. However, many months hence. "All right," said Draco. Draco popped into the loo to refresh himself, which mainly involved scourgifying his armpits, the height of class, Mother would be proud, and attempting some drying charms on his robes. His hair he deemed a lost cause tonight. Not that he had anyone to impress here. And besides, in this cottage with Granger, the human anemone, and her orange toilet brush of a familiar, his hair still easily won best in show. His entire look was complemented by the magnificent bruise starting to develop along his jaw. He pressed more of the salve into it, annoyed that Granger had been right about how bad it was going to get. He trudged to the kitchen, where Granger had the scroll of recommendations and the ring set out upon the kitchen table. She removed her white coat and stuffed it into a Muggle machine at the end of the worktop. Judging by the folded piles around it, a washing apparatus, another long-sleeved top underneath, Who knew that Granger had such an aversion to exposing her elbows? The kitchen table was pushed into a corner. Draco therefore took a chair next to Granger. From this vantage, far closer than he'd been to her at any point previously, he noted that she was in possession of a decent pair of tits. However, Granger chose that moment to unravel the scroll, now liberally scribbled with question marks and counter-suggestions, and Draco was unable to feel attracted because he was being suffocated by waves of swat. "Some of my principal concerns," said Granger, nodding her chin towards the parchment, which promised a long and arduous evening of argument. "First, let's eat something." She rummaged around in a pathetically empty cupboard and popped some options onto the table. As far as Draco was concerned, the principal article of diet was cat hair. He pulled a few orangey strands from his mouth as the cat, damn the creature, wound its way around his chair's leg, looking smugly at him. Granger did him the courtesy of looking abashed when she noticed. "Sorry." She waved her wand in Draco's direction, vanishing most of the fur. "It does get everywhere. Sometimes I think it can actually will it into existence, into unspeakable places." Draco, pulling at a hair, said "Pfft, pfft," in response. But what he really wanted to say was, "If I find orange fur on my balls tonight, I shall skin that animal with my bare hands." Granger tore open a package of something and passed it to him. "What is this?" asked Draco, holding up one of the things. "Cheesy Wotsits." Which explained everything, obviously. For her part, Granger ate tuna, directly from the tin. "Grim, Granger," said Draco. "It's protein," said Granger. She looked at the mediocre spread that Draco was scowling at and got a bit defensive. "I haven't had the time to go to the shops." "Why don't you send a house elf?" As the words came out of his mouth, Draco cut himself off. But it was too late. Granger was looking at him like he'd just confirmed, for the second time that evening, what an over-privileged wanker he was. She rose, tight-jawed, to make tea. It seemed an excuse to get away from his immediate vicinity, but whatever. Draco wasn't here to make friends. Granger banged about with the kettle. She looked like she was holding back a certain quantity of Draco-oriented vitriol. He surreptitiously checked his pockets. He did have a bezoar on him, in case his tea had any special additives courtesy of the house elf vigilante. Granger set their mugs on the table with rather more firmness than was necessary. There was no immediate evidence of poison. She had found a packet of biscuits to go with the tea. Draco ate 2/3 of it like a famished thing, and if they were poisoned, then so be it. Then Granger straightened out the parchment, seemed to, with an effort, compartmentalize her feelings about Draco, the wanker, and became all business. She queried him on the recommendations as though he were an apprentice or who had submitted this for review and ought to be grateful for the feedback. And so they argued through the list. On item 14, whether he would add caretaking staff to the laboratory's wards. He conceded. On item 26, whether she really needed to give him notice when she was leaving town. Yes. And if so, how much notice? 24 hours. On item 33, what constituted as a public event? Over 40 people. On item 34, why did she have to advise him of her attendance at Muggle Ones? Because he said so. Could he not make her home unplottable? She had Muggle friends who might want to visit. No. And so on and so forth until they came to item 56. Granger refilled their tea and pulled out another packet of biscuits, given that Draco had stress eaten the entirety of the first one. "So, the ring," said Granger. "The ring," repeated Draco. The crux of the thing. The object that meant he could continue his life in happiness, Grangerless freedom, and still satisfy the minister and Tonks. I've had it looked at by a few experts. It does seem quite safe. They were rather impressed by it, actually. Draco wanted to say, "Naturally, I'm a genius. Where is your Fitsit now?" He sipped his tea self-righteously instead. "I've also had a chat with Tonks," continued Granger. "She probably told you how much she likes the idea too. Means you'll be able to take on other assignments while monitoring me at a distance. So, all told, glowing reviews all around, with minimal cons, and I am willing to proceed. I do have a question for you, however." "Yes?" said Draco, even though he had a fair guess about the question. In fact, he was surprised she hadn't asked earlier. "How does the information tracked by the ring come to you?" Draco held up his hand and waved his wand at it, concealing the notice me not charm there. "Ah," said Granger, as the silver ring on Draco's finger came into view. Her gaze flicked from Draco's ring to the one on the table. Then, after some private deliberations in that overlarge brain of hers, she said, quite intelligently in Draco's opinion, "I shan't ask any more questions about the original use of these things. I feel that further details might put me off of the whole affair." "Good shout," said Draco. "Because yes, these ancient rings had long been worn by married couples in the Malfoy family. His mother had removed hers many years ago, following Lucius Malfoy's death in Azkaban. The ring's silence was the constant reminder of the loss, and she could no longer bear to wear it. Draco had modified the rings so that there would only be one-way communication between Granger's and his. He certainly didn't need her being alerted every time his heart rate spiked when he was having a morning wank, thanks." Living on in happy ignorance of these thoughts, Granger asked, "Is anything special required, or do I just put it on?" "I'll do it," said Draco. "It needs to be done by the person wearing the ring's mate." He tried to be gruff and businesslike about it, but there are very few things in the world as unbusinessmanlike as a man putting a ring on a woman's finger, and it was awkward despite his best attempts. He wondered if Granger found it as awkward as he did. She was studying the kitchen wallpaper, a tint of pink high on her cheeks. Her hand was small in his, and delicate. The ring went on effortlessly. He felt a kind of enlivening in the ring on his own hand. It had someone to talk to now. "The distress beacon is activated by twisting it 3 times around your finger," said Draco to break the silence. "Do that, and I'll apparate to you immediately." Granger snapped away from her fascination with the wallpaper. "All right." "Do reserve it for critical situations, Granger. Not because you found tea spilled on a book." "I'm very much hoping I'll never have to use it at all." She looked at the ring glinting on her hand. "At least the thing didn't immediately try to kill me." "Don't get too comfortable. I could be playing a long game." Draco tapped the scroll they had discussed ad nauseum, integrating the scribbled results of their back and forth into a clean version. Then he created a duplicate for her. "Now that we've finalized this, you must stick with it. We've established a duty of care, and I'd rather not be dragged in front of the Wismagot for professional negligence resulting in the death of the great Hermione Granger." "I understand," came the great Hermione Granger's serious reply. "Good. Now, before I go, one last thing." Draco dug a hand into his pocket. "My owl's lost half a pound of weight since we've been communicating, so I—" "Feed him more treacle tarts," interjected Granger. Her cat was on her lap, finishing the tin of tuna. "I've decided to give in to the trend and buy these things," finished Draco. He placed a pair of Weasley's jabbering jotters on the table. "You've probably heard of them, all the rage amongst the younger generation. Owls aren't quite the thing anymore. Not immediate enough. In Draco's opinion, a sad end to a long wizarding tradition. One couldn't write a strongly worded letter on a jabbering jotter. One simply couldn't. "Why, I'm familiar with those," said Granger. She was very obviously holding back a smile. Draco weighed the pros and cons of asking for the reason behind the smile. He decided against. Between her and the cat, the levels of smugness in the room would soon asphyxiate him. "So you know how they work?" asked Draco, passing her the small magical notepad. "Oh, yes," said Granger, accepting the object. "Thank you. I feel bad about you, Owl." "He'll recover and soon grow fat from lack of exercise." His job here done, Draco rose with a general mutter of thanks for the tea. Granger replied with some inaudible words of gratitude for the warning. The cat attempted to trip him and break his neck on his way out of the kitchen. Draco decided that that was a suitable end to an unpleasant evening. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this chapter of Draco Malfoy and the mortifying ordeal of being in lab. I hope you enjoyed the reading. I hope you got something done. And I love you always. Ciao.